How are you doing?
Hi, Vivienne. Thank you for having me on. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy that you are here with me today for this conversation. And thank you so much for your time with me today.
You're very welcome. I appreciate you having me on.
Mm, thank you. I did see some of the timeline that you sent to me, and then I really appreciate Anthony for introduce you to me, and I'm so amazed with your story. So for those of our listeners out there, so I haven't met Margaret in person yet, like a few of the ladies up here, and they were so kind and humble for willing to say yes to share their stories. So Margaret, do you want to tell us a little bit about who is Margaret Elisa Lee?
Absolutely. And once again, thank you also to Anthony Hewen, who is the founder of and known as the website doctor, for making this connection. It's through people like him that we get to have these opportunities to speak into existence who we are. So, who is Margaret Elisa Lee? In short, I was born in a jungle, raised in the countryside of Italy, and now live in Melbourne City. I'm of Cambodian background, but my first language was actually Italian. So it's not native to me, Cambodian. It's the third language I learned after English. A
Mm.
little bit of background on my biological and ethnical and cultural um, history and timeline. Um, yeah, so again, thank you for having me on the show and would love to share what it is that I think stood out and resonated for you and elaborate so that the audience can see what's possible for them through my journey.
I definitely think that you have a very diverse background, very diverse stories that you have. When it's so generous of you to share with me your timeline. When I look at it, I say, wow, that's so amazing. I was literally having goosebumps reading your stories. So from what you share, and I feel interview that you had with other people, you mentioned that you were actually started your life actually in a cut box.
Yeah, so for those of you that aren't familiar with this, my parents were actually escaping the Khmer Rouge. So during that time frame, a lot of us had to go across the border, and I ended up being born into the refugee camp of Thailand. So in the refugee camps, they didn't have things like incubators and cots or anything like that. My home for the first couple of months of my life was literally a cardboard box. So yeah, from the very beginning, I was born premature as well. So the beginning of my life was literally being born into scarcity and survival, and that really set the foundation for many of the stories that followed, which I give thanks for because, even looking back now, I am really grateful that my parents didn't do what a lot of other people did and just abandon their children or give them away or, because it would have been very difficult. My mum had me when she was 16, so she was still a child herself. And my dad had to leave his, education when the war broke out. He was in third year medicine. So there was a lot of challenges from the very beginning, to start that journey. But again, I look back now and I give thanks that everybody within my network and my family and the extension of that has been there for me to have this conversation with you today about where it all began.
So your life was a miracle since the day you were born.
Yes, and one of the things that I did in 2019 was actually to fast forward and backtrack. I actually went to Italy to find a doctor that helped me when I was a child come back to breathing again. Even in
Mm.
the refugee camp, there were often times that for some reason my lungs stopped working and I stopped breathing. So they had to lift me by the legs, give me a little bit of a whack on my backside to restart the diaphragm and the lungs and the respiratory system working, which again is one of the reasons why I'm passionate about doing the breath work consciously these days. But you know, from that story, I guess the little insight is if someone has changed your life along the way, go back and say thank you. Specifically to the doctor in Italy that I saw in 2019, he now has cerebral palsy, but I was grateful and lucky enough to be able to track him down, and that was another story within itself. Just to
Mm.
look back and say thank you for something that he helped me with when I was a child. One of the stories that I shared on my timeline relate to that, but I was only able to get and extract the truth from that by having a conversation with him and having the courage to go back and ask the hard questions. It was a beautiful moment. I've got photos of him as well. just to be able to, I guess, open that up and let it go and talk about it and integrate it, after having done the deep work and transforming through that, because you just never know when somebody's going to go. So if you've got the opportunity, whatever that is for you, like, do the work and have gratitude for the moment and the experience that brought you here.
Well, that's magnificent, because for you to track back your root and going back to where you were born, that's a big journey for you. So it has been a few stories or few life event in your life that is, I think, it to a lot of people will be traumas. It will be something that is really hurt. So how did you, if you don't mind me asking about that stories, you mentioned about events where you were actually assaulted when you were 4 years old, and then from there you have you've been through domestic violence, and there are a lot of series of events that you been through. So yeah, so how do you get over all this?
Yeah, so just to backtrack a little, and for the listeners out there, if you are going through something, just know that I'm only sharing the stories for the purpose of highlighting to you that you can go through very traumatic things, and some people don't make it out of it. I almost didn't. One of the incidents was attempting suicide at 19, but that you can go out and reach out to people and talk to them to express what you're depressing, because expression is the opposite of depression. So before I go a little bit into my story, I just wanted the listeners to be aware of that, because some of the things that I'm going to share, can trigger a lot of people, and especially growing up with an Oriental background, it's not really something that we talk about, especially on an emotional level within the home. So I'll get into it a little bit. Obviously, growing up in Italy, and I migrated there from the refugee camp within Thailand, within a couple of months of being born, automatically, because of your Oriental background, and we were only one of two families within, the vicinity, it's easy to be basically put into the limelight. You automatically become seen and heard, and that's a good thing if you're a child. However, in my case, I was singled out by somebody within authority, and I was sexually assaulted at the age of 4. So going through something like that very young, basically, it was my model of the world used to be that everything was loving and safe and family, but then it flipped, because all of a sudden I went from trusting and just being free, like a curious child, to wondering why I was being hurt that way. And so that was one incident that made me, I guess, lose a little bit of faith and trust within the world. The way that my parents protected me was basically to stop me playing from other kids. So you can imagine at the age of 4, when, people are saying to you, first of all, you're confused, you don't understand. And then you get taken away from your friends. You automatically think, like, what have I done wrong? What's wrong with me? Am I not worthy of this? Am I not good enough? Am I ugly? Like, you don't know as a kid. Like, you just think, because all children want is to be seen, heard, loved, and felt like they're enough. So that was one incident that happened, and I'm not even sure how I coped with that. I guess I had a doll. Her name was Bumbleina, a little blonde doll with blue eyes, and I played a lot by myself. I guess it taught me how to be really independent from a young age and become a little bit introverted as well. So I got really used to change. So, for me, identity crisis doesn't exist because I've had to shift so many times who I am to blend in and fit in. So if you have experienced something like childhood trauma to that nature, it is very common to have a people-pleasing tendency and have, something within you that wants you to basically find love everywhere else. If you're not taught the concept of love from a young age, that's something that can happen as a side effect. And that can lead into many of the other stories that I'll share in a moment. But fast forward, we actually migrated to Australia at the age of 8, and I guess life became normal, so to speak. We were able to, my parents fit into the Cambodian community, and, it started to seem normal, but I still knew that something wasn't right. Every time I got around like hospitals and churches and certain buildings, I'd get a weird sensation. I could never understand it. I didn't know what it was. At the age of 14, I guess, having grown up with a Caucasian friend, it was a bit strange, but I was told to only have Asian friends. And I think that was done because of, being exposed as an Asian child in a European environment and then singled out. I guess that was their way of protecting me. So I
Mm,
wasn't allowed to go out. I was really like, stay home, do the maths. It made me a really good student. Straight A's, top 1%, and still there at the moment in a different area. But that caused also for me to become rebellious, because between the age of 0 and 7, that's where your values and beliefs are formed, and you're basically hypnotized, and that's set in concrete. And then post that age, you start to challenge, you start to try and find your own way. And I did that by basically trying to fit in with Asian communities, but
mm,
what they were doing drugs, they were, doing all sorts of things that, yeah, I don't encourage you to take on as a habit. I all for try it once and, see what it's like, but then there comes a time where, yeah, it gets really unstable. So what happened there was, and I remember the incident specifically. I just wanted to go out with my friend, but because of the, tiger mom, tiger dad, typical Asian upbringing, right? Stay home,
mm,
do your homework, don't go anywhere, listen to what we say, don't do what we do. It's very rigid. It caused me to become a big rebel. So I started wagging school and I started getting involved with the Asian community, but I guess a little less educated in and very not street smart. I
mm,
ended up being in a situation where I was sexually assaulted again. So these kind of things kept happening within my life, and I couldn't work out, like, am I a bad person? Is there something wrong with me? Is it because I'm short and chubby and all of those insecurities played in. So
mm,
I just wanted to highlight to the listeners that sometimes people do things, and it's not because they're bad people. It's because often they're not educated around, being able to express what's really going on. So what I
mm,
was doing was I was just looking for love because in the family home, looking back, there was a lot of domestic violence in the family home. If you didn't do what you were told, I remember getting belted at the age of 8 and having to go to school with, purple legs. So that was normal, but it's not normal,
mm,
and I didn't understand it because I thought, well, this is a place where I'm supposed to be safe at home. But it
mm,
was something that I witnessed throughout my entire childhood. There was always yelling and screaming and condescending and all the behaviors that had I known what I know now, I would have said even more than I did. But I do remember early on, saying like, this is not acceptable. You shouldn't be hitting people. You shouldn't be yelling at people. But it
mm,
all fell on deaf ears, right? And I know now that the reason for that was because they didn't want people to like look in and judge single parenting. There's so many stigmas around the fundamental thing that people do when they're
mm,
looking for love that cause divergent behaviors, so to speak. And yeah, so that's a little bit of insight. Again, that led to being in the wrong crowd, being sexually assaulted, ended up being bullied because I have a very friendly nature, despite the things that have happened, and I think you've accidentally muted. Um, like I basically just wanted to fit in. And that also caused me to become friends with men. So I was never interested in dating or anything like that. I just preferred men because they came with less drama. And that led to a bunch of girls getting really jealous, and it was 8-on-1, and they beat me up. So I went to the shopping center to buy a CD, and basically they jumped me, 8 of them, at Chadstone Shopping Center. And that was terrifying. I ended up urinating my pants and just all of these things happen. And again, I couldn't understand. I'm like, I'm not a bad person. I'm just buying Mariah Carey CD. Like, is the music that bad that something like this has to happen? And yeah, so things like that just kept happening within my life. And it led to, again, looking for love in all of the wrong places. For a long time, that gave me social anxiety. I didn't know how to trust people. I was very self-conscious. I was looking for anything that would distract me from thinking about all the shame that I already had from childhood and growing up in a family that was violent and all of the things. And it was just one thing after the other. So fast forward through that, I was very curious. So I even got into, trying drugs. And I guess that's what you do when you're, confused and don't want to think about it. There was a time where I was drinking alcohol. The good thing about me, though, was that I was very curious and I was happy to jump in and try it, but I never got to the point where I became completely addicted to anything. And, for those people listening, addiction is just a coping mechanism that people fall into in order to deal with something that they don't yet have the courage to do, because it's hard. It's hard to go in and dig and find what it was that actually caused it and then deal with it and transform through it and heal it. So if someone in your life is experiencing addiction, ask them to go deeper with the question and with somebody that's trained to help them understand why they're doing it. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It's a behavior that people adopt to cope with how they're feeling, basically. Yeah, so I guess that led to the age of 19. At the age of 19, everything just kept compounding. And at the age of 19, I actually attempted to take my own life because I thought to myself, what's the point? I'm just a dirty kid with all this stuff that happened to her. I felt unworthy as a woman. Who's going to want to be with anyone that's been like, touched that way? I remember the birds and the bees talk that I got, and it was specifically like, girls are like diamonds. Once they're touched, they're ruined. That was the pre-frame and limitations that and God bless my parents, but they didn't know what they were doing either. Like I said, mum had me when she was 16, and yeah, dad was a kid himself. So, all of these things started with basically how my life started as a child, being singled out and not really understanding how to express myself. And I want to emphasize on that. Growing up, it was never a normal thing to speak about your emotions, to speak about what was really going on, because there was a expectation set by people. You've got to behave a certain way and earn a certain amount of money and, just be a really good student. And there was always comparison to people outside of the family. One of the good things about me, though, and one of the reasons that the conflict also escalated at times was that I was never scared of actually using my voice. So if I didn't like something, you would hear about it. And then I realized that also wasn't healthy to have the angry outbursts because there was resentment and anger and frustration. And it was all coming out because I was hurting, but I didn't have anyone to speak to about that. If you ask the other siblings in the family, they had a completely different upbringing. They're like, did we even grow up in the same family? And that's very common as well. I think one of the reasons that I decided to really just go deeper into understanding, the work with women, human behavior, psychology, and why people think, feel, and act a certain way is because at 19, when I attempted suicide, I remember I had fragments and memories of things that happened, and I wanted to speak about it. And I actually got accused of lying by a trained psychologist. So I still remember his name. His name was Philip, and I was furious because I was thinking, okay, I'm me. I have built a lot of resistance between, the first incident happening to the age of 19. So I had some sort of sense around this isn't right. I shouldn't be being accused of like not telling the truth. And I just decided within my mind that I couldn't rely on the current education system and the health system to find what was going on beneath the surface. And I guess that's when I sort of discovered the self. I started getting interested in philosophy. I started going into, understanding myself from a deeper level away from mainstream education. And that's kind of what has led me to like using my experiences. And there's a whole rap sheet. You've seen the list. I think you're on mute, Vivienne.
Yeah. I was like, I was listening to your stories, and thank you so much for being so vulnerable to share your whole stories. And it is something that, like you say, it can be triggering for some people because they might have this similar experience. And for you to speak so freely and so openly about it, so you must have been through a lot of healing to come to this stage. So what were your, how did you come to here, being able to share it so openly?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. In my mind, I rejected being Asian because I grew up in Italy. In my mind, I was a little Italian kid, right? So step one for me was actually acknowledging my origin and where I came from. So I was, I guess, a bit of a princess and, didn't really want to acknowledge that I was Asian because that's not the upbringing I had. So the first thing I did was, and the big awakening moment for me, and that's where I realized what wealth and being rich really is, was when I went back to Cambodia in 2012 and 13. So, it was when I stepped back and realized, like, I remember going to my grandfather's house and, they're not like the houses that we live in today. Some of them live in like things that people have as cubby houses for their children to play in the backyard, right? And I remember going there and on the wall they had photos of us on the wall as if like, how you go to museums and you see, placards of people and a timeline of, so we were their inspiration story. And I just thought to myself, wow, these people look at us as the ones that made it, and here I am like rejecting that I'm Cambodian because, it's a third world country and it wasn't my, little Disneyland upbringing that I had in Italy. And like I said, even though all of these things happened within my childhood, I still have amazing memories of that. That was one small thing that happened that led to many others, but I still look back with gratitude and I give thanks for growing up in the country. And, some of my siblings don't even ride a push bike. It's how I spent my childhood. But it was going back to Cambodia and just questioning why I was rejecting being Cambodian and then falling in love with my family there. I remember one night going to a restaurant there and it's dirt cheap to eat there. It's like $1 a day or something, and everybody came and I was able to feed everybody for under $100 and they were so happy and grateful. And I was like, we take so much for granted, you know what I mean? Like we have all the things in the world and I remember, them wanting, like we were staying in a hotel and they'd never done anything like that. So a hotel over there in Button Bong is about $15 to $25. People pay more for a meal. And with them, it was like a once in a lifetime experience to be able to have that. And then buffet breakfast comes along and so I guess for me, back to your question, I had to really go start at the beginning. I actually tried to find my birthplace, but the refugee camp got dismantled and I couldn't pinpoint that location. But I wanted to find out, like, what was my reason and purpose for being born? And it's so interesting because I remember one day just being in a bookstore and thinking to myself, I have an urge to buy a Nelson Mandela book. I had no idea why that feeling came through. I found later that he actually died that day. So I don't know how that, connection was made with, maybe it's because my fiance now is in South Africa. Who knows? The story is still unfolding, right? But back to answering your question, step one was really getting raw and real about everything that happened. And it started with going back to my birthplace to Cambodia, really understanding the meaning of what it is to feel rich inside out. And I'm not talking monetarily. I love money. Money is able to, facilitate the things that we do now. But the internal wealth of really understanding your story is the pivoting moment of where everything begins for you, right? So I decided to do that with every single thing that triggered me that I didn't feel was right. It took going in and working with my life coach and just going deep into therapy to extract it all. Because at the beginning, who wants to find out and remember the details about what happened in those incidents? Nobody. But if for the listeners, it is one of the most empowering, profound things that you can do, because once you know, you also realize it is just a part of the story, right? So the reason why I'm so passionate now about working with people to shift that generational trauma and share my story so openly and it's because I've gone through it myself and come out the other side from all those tragic events, and even an attempted suicide and wanting to not be here anymore, and
Mm-mm.
just understanding that the silver lining was that something's trying to come through me. And the reason I had to go through all that is to be a living example of what's possible for you, because it is possible for you and anyone that takes on the challenge of just getting raw and real. Is it going to hurt? Absolutely, but it's going to hurt more if you hold it in, because if you're aware of the studies within neuroscience and epigenetics, your body is 95% of your unconscious mind. So if there's something within your mind that isn't transformed and integrated, and you don't have a full understanding of why you feel a certain way, how you think, feel, and that gets affected. And that can result in, many of things that we can prevent with chronic illness and disease manifesting as a result of that, to show you that something inside needs working on. So find somebody that, and to be honest, this doesn't look like a trauma on the surface. It looks like overwhelm, stress, overworking, over shopping, addiction to food. It's everyday people's stuff that's
Mm.
buried underneath the severity of what's really actually going on. So if you're feeling off, if you're feeling overtired, you can't sleep and you're exhausted, and small things overwhelm you, or you're just holding it in, the best thing you can do is start to express it, because expression is the opposite of depression in every way, shape, and form in your human experience. That is how you're going to learn what's really going on. And
Mm.
there are many people out there that are trained to do this. Some of the best life coaches in the world have never studied life coaching, but they've gone through it. And to be honest, it hasn't always been this way. It's only going through all the work and getting really clear and raw about the story and feeling it and healing it that I'm even able to share it. Had you asked me and told me 5 years ago that I'd be doing this, I probably would have laughed in your face and said, I'm not telling anyone that. That's for me in the vault.
Mm. That's amazing.
So I guess that's my message with regard to that part of the story. It's going to be scary. Yes, it is. It's going to hurt a little. Yes, it is. But it will be worse if you hold it in long term, because I didn't realize that that one little incident, and then compounded, results in many behaviors to try and cope and evade and basically explore any way to not deal with it. I went to the extent of, in 2017, of going to 10 countries over 5 years to basically avoid doing the work,
No.
right? My excuse was, I'm traveling the world, I'm an independent woman. But the truth was, I didn't want to face my own truth. That is,
Mm.
something that landed, and I thought, okay, if I don't transform this and I don't reset how I think, how I feel inside is going to
Mm.
affect every area of my life. And I can tell you now, as a result of that, I didn't think that I could love unconditionally, beginning with myself. But then, as a result of me saying, I'm ready to open my heart, and I've also been able to manifest the love of
Mm.
my life into my world. So it's not just going to help you as a human being feel whole and, be able to create from the place of within you like a curious child. It
Mm.
affects every relationship within your life, within your business, and everybody that you come across. And then you get to meet people like Vivienne, who get you to tell the story.
Yeah, that's true. It is you who attract the people in your life eventually, right?
Exactly. And everybody said this about leadership: become the person that you want to attract.
Mm.
And as a result of that, you can make a much bigger impact when you do that, because you're, I guess, resonating and vibrating with the frequency of creation as opposed
Mm.
to survival and scarcity. And when you truly understand that, it's the spiritual journey is individual, right? It's not something that can be taught to you. It's not something that can come through you. It's not something that can't come within you, that is within you. It's all of the above. But
Mm.
how you get there is your unique path to mastery and internal inquiry.
Mm.
So I highly recommend that you're brave enough to ask yourself the question. And here's two questions that really changed the game for me. It was, who am I and who am I not? Those two
Mm.
questions alone allowed me to eliminate a lot out of not behaving in ways that didn't resonate with my highest values?
Yeah, that's a very impactful question, which not many people will know the answers because probably they have never asked themselves that question as well.
Exactly. And once upon a time, I was one of those people because I was running away, I was evading, I was masking, I was, really good at drinking once upon a time because that meant I didn't have to think about the hard stuff. An important project that you are going to work on within your lifetime is you because everything is trying to come through you somehow. And the only way you can do that, and this leads into like things like imposter syndrome, right? The only way you're not going to feel inadequate is if you show up as the best version of you. And the only way that you can do that is to have a mindset to embody self-mastery. But again, you can only do that if the junk is cleared. It's not about fixing anything. You don't need to get rid of anything. What happened within your childhood, your teenagehood, your career, your womanhood is all a part of you. And I found that what's been most empowering for me is being able to accept every single part of the journey that's come through, learn something from that, and use that to pivot into, the next step. And that's yeah, I hope that helps you out.
Wow, that's a magnificent journey that you have. And then it is a lot. I think the listener will be like, wow, that's a lot of events that been going through in your life. And then you did mention about you been traveling to places to try to escape from being finding the truth about yourself. So when is that moment that you decided that you wanted to like change or decided to like, that's it, I wanted to go and find myself? When is that moment?
Yeah, so in 2017, I went through horrific trauma. I don't want to go too much into the details of that, but basically, that's when I started asking myself the question, and I realized that I didn't want to live that way anymore. So I did one of the most ridiculous things you can do. I am somebody that had never even traveled interstate or even like over the Westgate Bridge. If you're in Melbourne, you know what that is, by myself. So I decided the only way to face myself was to go on a random trip across the other side of the world on my own. So I decided to travel to Israel. No friends, no connections, no phone, no map, nothing. And at that time I was still very fragile in the mind. And for those of you that haven't been there, the Dead Sea is world renowned for being somewhere where people go on a pilgrimage to, I guess, find themselves and have a rebirth, right? But to be completely honest, I wanted to end it that day. I was at the point where I was like, here I am reliving the cycle of when I was 19, the monkey mind and inner critic kicks in, and I just wanted to leave the planet. And I thought to myself, no one's gonna know. Like, no one even knows I'm here. I remember family saying, what the hell are you doing in the Middle East? But here's the thing that happened, right? It is impossible to drown in the Dead Sea because of the salinity within the water. It forces you to rise. And I'm like, really? This is the universal joke right now? Okay, cool. So at the Dead Sea is where I had my rebirth. That's where I realized, obviously, I'm supposed to go in and do this work and find out why all of this has happened, to do something with it. I'm not supposed to just stop and end it here. It was really beautiful how that came about. And I celebrated with a beer, which I don't drink anymore, but the Dead Sea is actually really hot. It's like 40 degrees in the water and you're in the middle of a desert. So the brochures look amazing, but I'm telling you right now, like the Icelandic hot springs are probably nicer. And I've been there too. But what happened after that trip was I got back to Cyprus, which is where I pivoted to Israel from. And I found the work of, one of the mentors that is coming to Australia this month, Dr. Joe Dispenza.
I did see your photo with Dr. Joe.
Yeah, and I just started, I guess I was already curious about neuroscience, neuroplasticity, and all of that, human behavior from having dived in, back in the early 2000s, and then finding, a book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Deutsch, getting curious about neuroplasticity. I'm like, what is this stuff? And then I realized, okay, I've got a choice. I can stay stuck. I can stay in the mindset of like trying to avoid it and evade it. Or I can sit here because it's too hot to bloody go outside to do anything anyway, and watch this. And that was, one of the most profound things that I've ever done within my life. And I've been able to say thank you, to Dr. Joe for that, to get me started on the journey of learning how to sit in the fire, learning how to really get even more raw and real. Like, stop traveling the world because you're running away. Do it because you love to, but sit in the fire and do the work. And that's been the absolute game changer for me. Ever since then, I've made it my mission to understand why people think, feel, act, and behave a certain way. I really love learning and studying why people do certain things and how they respond and how they deal with, everyday stress. Because within my lifetime as well, I've got 20 years of corporate. So I've spent 20 years in legal, finance, admin, accounting, real estate. And sometimes, like I sort of shared earlier, it doesn't look like trauma. People don't talk about trauma, so to speak. They talk about, you hear about it sometimes when it's too late and they've taken the drastic measure of what I tried to do at 19 and 37. But, I became really passionate about just learning about the surface level symptoms. So in corporate, I'm sure everybody who's worked a corporate job knows what it's like to stress out, be micromanaged, you're overthinking and overtired and you're probably drinking way too much coffee than you need. I went from a size 6 to a size 12 in no time because office life is great. You get all the donuts and, that's common. That can be a masking behavior to something that's happening beneath the surface. Some people go into busyness and overworking because they're trying to avoid a life they don't like at home or themselves, So for the people that are listening, if you see these behaviors happening, you can see that somebody's in a state of stress. Just ask them, to speak to somebody if they're not okay. Because if you say to them, "Are you okay?" they're gonna say yes. But if you actually just get curious and become a little bit more inquisitive in such a way that they feel heard, not investigated, start to open up a little, And I guess sort of fast forwarding with that, I noticed that people within my workplace were behaving that way. And it was through just conversation and introducing them to learning how to just sit within their mind and, start to adopt calming strategies, and so that their nervous system started to get nurtured instead of reacting to shock all the time or hiding it. Now I sort of got, just more passionate again to realizing I actually don't want to work in the corporate world. And I remember the pivoting moment when that happened. One of my colleagues celebrated 25 years in the company, and she was just bitter. And I thought, I don't want to, like, I don't want that to be my future. I started to piece together, again, it goes back to knowing the story. I started to piece together what was really of high value and like my purpose and passion, what the Japanese called your ikigai, your reason, purpose for being. You're here to do more than work and pay bills and build a house and get married and have kids and move on. If that's what you got to do, though, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, there was a fire inside me, and I knew that all of these things, created my past and were here to teach me something about what to create moving forward. So for me personally, the last couple of years have been very challenging for many people, and my heart goes out to the people that, have experienced many things. But one of the blessings in disguise was that I actually asked for a break. I was tired of running. I was tired of like trying to cope by, leaving and exploring the world. On the day that Melbourne got completely locked down, I was actually supposed to fly out to Mexico. But I knew it was a sign. I took the time to again go deeper inwards. And look, we're always doing the work. If anybody tells you that they're fully healed, they are lying, right? We're always working on something because it changes from personal to business to the expansion of legacy. And I'm really grateful for that because I've been able to work on myself, work with other people, go deeper into a range of ways to just help others and help them transform through things that I've gone through. And that's I guess the silver lining in all of this. I realized the power of owning my story. I work
Mm,
towards having the courage to speak about it without breaking down, crying, or running away, because that happened. A lot of social anxiety and introvertism came about, but I learned to deal with all of that. And I just realized if I get out of my own way, I can impact and help so many people that are probably sitting there frightened and scared to talk about these things because of the shame and the guilt and just not feeling, I guess, like you can fit in or accepted by people that haven't gone through this. But
mm,
everybody has their version of something that they're trying to divert their attention from. And my message
mm,
is please speak about it, please be open about it.
mm. Wow. So you were saying that 17 that you went to Dead Sea because there was at one stage there was some connection interruption. So you were saying that you've been through some really traumatized event that you went to the Dead Sea. So do you say that that time around 2017 is the time that is you decided to shift your life 360?
That's correct. So in 2017, I actually went through some severe domestic violence, and that resulted in actually, almost being strangled to death. Again, it was just tragedy after tragedy. I think, I say this with love. Most people have gone through one thing that I've gone through and, taken the drastic measure of ending up in severe addiction or ending their life. So
Mm,
my message is, I'm like you, just a human being, and with a story, well, actually many stories, but
mm,
I want people to know that regardless of what it is, right? There is somebody out there that's been through something. Maybe your file isn't as full, A to Z, as mine. Or
mm,
maybe it's one thing, or maybe it's two things. Maybe it's not even as severe as being abused as a child or something like that. Maybe it's something like bullying, anything. If you're not feeling good,
mm,
please talk about it. But yes, 2017 was very emotionally unstabilizing within my life. I went from having it all to having my world flipped upside down and having absolutely nothing and then less than nothing. So, again, my reality was challenged and I realized then like why have I created this? But again, I didn't know that I created it. So there was a lot of work to do in understanding that part of the paradigm, so to speak. Um,
mm,
but it was then that I realized that I didn't want to live that way. So instead of goal setting, I actually set a word for every year. And after that happened, my word for 2017 was yes. I said yes to anything that pushed me out of the comfort zone. And that's how I ended up going to many holidays. I had a rule. If I go on holiday, I'm not coming home until I book the next one. And then 2018, I set the word Excelsior because I started 2018 and I was fortunate enough to spend Christmas in New York. It's a beautiful experience. If you haven't
mm,
done it, please do it. And the word then was Excelsior because I wanted to not just say yes, I wanted to level up from what I said yes from.
mm,
Deeper again, that was at the height of me working with a coach and life mentor. And 2019, it was Ikigai. It became something that wasn't about me anymore at all. I had said yes to life, I'd leveled up, and now it's about really getting clarity on my reason and purpose for being. That's why I love the word. You know,
mm,
and then 2020 came, and that was an interesting one. I chose the word magnetic because I wanted to attract into my world the people that I could see, had been through such things, had aligned vision, were clear on their values, and wanted to just brainstorm around it. Like
mm,
who are the people that I want to hang out with within my life? And, something really interesting happens when you start saying yes to yourself and I guess you shift directions. I ended up not being friends with many people that I had grown up with. And a
mm,
part of entrepreneurship, or even evolving as a human being, you realize that sometimes you can be around people, and then when you do have different values, you can sort of start to split.
Mm,
And it's not about having animosity for that. Like, you just grow out of it. Like you grow out of your clothes. You grow out of certain lifestyle. Yeah, and I disconnected myself from anyone that had any of the habits that caused me to sort of distract myself within that. I don't
mm,
blame anyone for anything. It was my choice, but that was just something that happened.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, and then 2021 was mastery. I realized, whatever it was that I was doing, I wanted to become a master of it. So whether it was studying or, and mostly it was studying, up until that point, I'd immersed myself in learning many things about human behavior and psychology. And I just wanted to make sure that, for example, if you're having brain surgery, you're not going to a pediatrician, you're going to a brain surgeon because
mm,
they know how to get in with a precision incision and, extract what they need and basically it's a one you get one shot.
mm-hmm. That's true.
So that was really, really important. But yeah, that's the kind of trajectory that 2017 caused me to have when I made the decision within myself to say, I'm not going to be a victim of this. I'm not going to be someone that talks about these situations with resentment. And
Mm,
it's a lot of work going in to be able to even forgive and even thank these people for all of these incidents. Because for me, I realized there's something profound to learn from this, and it's nothing to do with you. There's a purpose and reason that every single thing happens within your life. And it's about you being able to go in and see the silver lining of why that happened within your life for you. So, um, it
mm,
might be hard for many people to also understand why I give thanks for, what happened at 4 and 14 and all of the other things that we haven't even touched on between that. But there is so much power when you can stand in your own and forgive yourself. It's not even about forgiving them, it's about forgiving yourself for just, I guess, manifesting that experience. You could have the insight and learning that the only person you can forgive is yourself, you know.
oh,
And the reason I say that is this: there might be something that happens within your life and that person passes away. If you don't do the work to forgive yourself, you're living with that resentment for the rest of your life.
mm,
That's not hurting them, that's hurting you. And when that lands, that is the thing that for me, I realized there's no point holding on to any of that. To be limitless is to be free. It's to let it
mm. True. Yeah, to let go of all this in yourself first before you can accept others. And I love that. I really love that you have the words of the year every year. So what's for 2023?
2023 is impact. Um,
Impact. Wow.
Impact. Exactly. So here's the reason why I chose a word. I used to goal set, and I think everybody's been guilty of this. I never did any of it, right? Because I think it was just too much, I guess, reverse engineering habits and all of the things that you have to do just
Mm,
overwhelm. So
mm-hmm,
for me, by choosing a word and doing something every single day that aligned to that value and word, it was just easier. So
mm-hmm,
by default, if you have the clarity on what it is that you want to do, whether it's with your personal goals or financial goals or career goals or whatever it is that you want to do, it's just easier. By having this conversation, we're creating an impact because we're raising awareness around the things that I've experienced and that you've experienced, so other people can say, yep, me too. That's how I
mm.
felt, right?
Wow.
That, that's why I choose words versus like the SMART goals, so to speak. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with setting goals, even that word, I do have things that have now integrated into my life, and I don't have to so-called, like, I don't have an alarm for anything, for example. For me it's all about flow. Like, I know by working with the unconscious mind as well, how to you just do it because it's in alignment with my values. I don't have to force myself, I don't have to do any extreme fads, which I have done before, things like
Mm. Wow. I love that. I love that word impact for 2023 as well, because as you have been doing a lot to impact others, and then I love the work that you're doing, and then all your clients going to be beneficial from what you have done. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I really think that it is going to be so impactful to everyone who does listen to our conversation today.
Thank you, Vivienne. And I'll add on to that. Impact doesn't have to look like something grand and life-changing. Just listening to somebody when they need an ear without judgment, you can be the reason they have a beautiful day. And something that I shared today, at the time of this recording, it's International Women's Day. You know, yesterday I had a day where, like any human, life happens. And I guess I just needed to hear that what I was doing is actually impacting somebody's life. I received a phone call out of nowhere from someone that I guess I've been mentoring from behind the scenes and, doing the work for a long time with, to thank me. And it was an hour phone call of gratitude to thank me for, all the little seeds that had planted along the way. She said to me, I never understood why you say certain things at a certain time. Today it landed. It actually made sense to me because I opened up to really, understand what it was that you were saying without saying. And now it makes sense. And I'm going to do this, this, this. And I'm like, so some people say to me, like, you're like the wisdom whisperer. When I don't know what to do, I ask myself, what would Margaret do? And then your voice pops up. So you can be that for somebody else. Impact doesn't have to be a huge transformational, but it is going to have a huge impact. So plant the seeds of wisdom often in your own mind and other people's mind, because that's the garden that's going to grow and sprout to feed anyone else that needs it down the track. You don't know how impactful what you do today is going to be 100 years from now. But if you come from a place of pure intention, that's always going to add value to somebody's life.
Yes, that's definitely 100%. I really love that. Yes, because of maybe one single word to others, it wasn't really, we might not think that it is something a big deal, but to someone it can be so impactful and change their perspective in life, and we just didn't realize that.
Exactly. And going back to childhood, all children want is to be seen, to be heard, and to be loved. And sometimes we forget as adults that inner child is always with us. We forget sometimes to be curious and play. And I think that's really important to bring up, because sometimes you may be looking at somebody that's in an adult's body, but they just want to tell a story. And sometimes all you need to do to help somebody is just listen.
Yeah, just listen. That's right. It's the thing that seems very simple, and then it is like it can change others. People just need to be seen, to be heard, which they probably didn't get a lot of chance for having that.
Yeah, I think as adults, our brains and our physiology and our minds are wired to problem solve. So sometimes we complicate things when we don't need to, but we don't realize we're doing it because that's how we're sort of wired to think. We try and navigate through the way and neural pathways that we've come to learn things. So sometimes when people say things that are really simple, it can be really confusing, So it takes continuing to ask the question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. If you have to ask something 100 times until you get it, do that. Maybe do it with theory or something, but do it.
I love that. That's important. Yeah, because people thought that it's a lot of time people were so worried about what people think of them, and they thought that am I allowed to ask this question? And that's all come from children. Being a child that wasn't really having given the chance, and that's grown them. I like in one of your interview you say that the broken child in an adult body.
Yes. Yeah, there are so many broken children in adult bodies, and it goes back to, again, if you've grown up in a family where it wasn't encouraged to speak about your emotions and you suppress that child still needs to be heard and seen, and they're feeling it, they're thinking it, they're acting things out because they want that question answered. They don't know how to do that unless you teach them the way. And one of the things that I really would love to see moving forward is a subject of love being taught at school. You know, if you're not taught in the family home, it's one of the reasons that I sort of, I guess, rebelled. I'm not saying that the parents weren't loving. It's just my version of what it meant and what was taught to me was completely different. You know, I remember being early on and just being really wowed by going to my friends' houses and seeing them have like Sunday lunch together. I'm like, that doesn't happen. Like, is that a normal thing? You know, so yeah, and I'm not talking about love between a man and a woman. That's very important as well. And I'm more talking about immaculate love for yourself, you know, and being able, like you said, to just stand on your own two feet and have that congruent love for you, you know, like accepting all part of you. So the image that you have of yourself in your mind is the most profound thing that you can create because that's what's going to project out to the world. So you know, if there's a part of you that thinks you're not good enough, that's going to show up, you know. And again, it takes deep work to go into this, but I also want to show this. It doesn't need to take weeks, months, years in therapy to get all of this done either. You know, it's the human mechanics and the human brain is designed a certain way, so there is a system within you. You're not a machine, but it is mechanical of how you can learn to think about, you know, getting yourself out of a mindset that is defaulting to scarcity and it actually is really simple. But again, because we're wired to problem solve and we like to create stories and all of that, it can appear very difficult.
Yeah, we are I think it's the meaning that we give to some things that happen or within us that's create the problems.
100%, you know, the meaning you give is the meaning you live. And one thing that I, you know, love to share that I heard from one of my mentors is the problem is always at the point of perception. If you know how to strategically think when you realize there's a problem, you can always shift the perception. Even if it's 1%, you know, that's going to be an absolute game changer. And it wasn't until I learned these tools and, you know, do this with my clients that I realized how easy it actually is. When you go into the fundamental, even deeper things like, you know, disease and that, it's hard for people that haven't studied things like epigenetics to understand the power of consciously choosing your state and how you think like that. But yeah, we won't go too deep into that at the moment, but to scratch the surface, it's very, very simple to, you know, get to a point where you're doing a daily self-inquiry and you consciously choose what you want to happen within your life. Becoming the cause of all the side effects within your life is something that you get to choose, you know. So while you're breathing, choose wisely.
Wow. Well, that's a lot of things that you have, and that are definitely you have so much to share and so much to give to your clients and to many people out there. And I love that. Yeah, I think this I know that you've been sharing just the surface, and you have a lot more deeper knowledge to share. So talking about Dr. Joe Dispenza, I know that you met him in person. So what was that experience like, meeting him in person?
Wow, my heart's getting butterflies just thinking about it again. Yeah, so I started taking on his work as well as John DeMartini, you know, back in 2017. I guess I just needed a dominant male voice to get into my brain and reprogram how I was feeling and thinking. And I immersed completely. You know, it was actually, I read all of his books, did all of his courses, just immersed in everything that I could find. You know, got a program called The Formula, which has meditations attached, and I just really got into the world, you know, started to really get my head around what is quantum physics and neuroscience and how can I apply that in my world to create my reality, and how do I become a master manifestor, you know, all the big words that people use, but really it's learning how to become the conscious creator by knowing how to think your way into situations that you want to see in your world. So to summarize it for people that you know, have never done this work, your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. So the more work you do on yourself inside, that's going to reflect in the outside world. And, you know, you've heard some of the stories that I've been through. I've gone from being literally in the pits of hell to traveling, to 10 countries over 5 years, manifesting love, going through career change, doing what I love with people and meeting people like yourself. And that moment for me, when I met Joe Dispenza, he came to Melbourne in 2018 to do the Becoming Supernatural launch. I was the crazy person that ran from the top of the stairs to the bottom of the stairs. And I'm pretty sure I was the only one that got my poster signed because I wanted him to know, the empowering statement that I came up with myself. And I gave him a copy of the poster, and my poster said, I am in control of my emotions, and I use my voice to empower others. And he signed that, and I'll have that for the rest of my life.
Mm.
It was within that seminar that he did a deep meditation, and I just, again, like, it's about learning. What I loved about the book Becoming Supernatural is that he touched on the brain state of theta. So that's, if you don't know what that is, it's your state of hypnotherapy, basically. Some people are a bit funny about hypnotherapy, but you hypnotize yourself every single day before you go to sleep and just when you wake up in the morning. And what happened within that meditation was, for the first time, I actually was able to crack my heart open and just go completely into childlike state of possibility again. Before that, life was dark. Everything hurt. Like, it wasn't a pleasant place to be. But after having the courage to go in, and this is why he talks about sitting in the fire, like really getting raw and real what's going on within you, I started to really get curious about the brain state of theta and what I could do with other people by going into their mind and reprogramming the unconscious mind through, the transformational, conversational, and deeper therapy through the power of hypnosis. And so, yeah, that was 2018. And then, as I sort of mentioned before, in 2019, I decided after 30 years to go back to Italy and reconnect with my family there, ask deeper questions, find the doctor that helped me when I was a child and I'd gone through that incident, reconnect with my father. My godmother passed away, reconnect with my babysitter. And I surprised them all. I didn't tell them I was coming. I just showed up one day and turned up to their houses. And, I've got videos. And the most amazing thing was being able to go into my godfather's house, actually. And, because I remember as a child looking out the window and the house was exactly the same. The only thing that was different was that my godbrother's daughter now lives in that room. And coincidentally enough, I didn't know this, but Joe Dispenza had a cruise in Europe at the same time. So I'd already booked my flight to Italy, went back, and then at the same time that I had done that, his cruise was right in the middle of my trip. So I was like, I can't not go, it was just divine timing. So on the first night that we were there, we had an a la carte dinner, and he made the effort to go around to over 850 people and greet every single person one by one. I have a video of him where we're having a bit of a joke, and I was so excited. I'm like, oh my God, Joe Dispenza is near my pineal gland.
Oh.
And it was beautiful. And I think what I loved about that, and I think that's why I am this way as well, he's so accessible. He's just like you and I. I remember a lot of my friends would go out the night before. I'd be like up early, in the gym. He'd be in the gym there with me. There were a lot of times where we just crossed paths, and I was able to just say thank you, in person, and give him a hug and get a couple of kisses on my temples, and just make a really profound memory of. And that cruise was actually the first and last. That cruise was on a ship called the New Statendom, which was only a year old, 14 stories high. And I think the only person that had been on that was Oprah Winfrey. She had a signature wine on there.
Wow.
The beautiful thing about that was that I made so many friends and memories on that cruise. And it was a community of other like-minded people who had very similar, stories to what I've transformed through. And I realized, like, unfortunately, this is so common, but there's nothing normal about, living with that. What's common is that there are many people that have transformed not just trauma of the natures that I spoke of, but physiological things, neurological things. There's a lot of research that goes into the work and why we love doing this work that he showed us on that. And
Mm.
I mean, I was never going to say no to cruising the Mediterranean with 850 people that love this work.
Wow, that's a lot of them. And such a beautiful experience for you as well, I would say.
Yeah, and it was that cruise. So even up to that point, I still didn't have the courage to like step out and share my story or any of that. But it was at that cruise and within that environment and after a big meditation that I realized I've got to do something with this. Like I can't just hold it in. Like it'll die with me if I don't do anything with it. I'm supposed
Mm.
to do something with it. And yeah, slowly I started just again going deeper in my story. There was a lot of integration and releasing and getting trained up to not only just embody the tools, but learn how to work with them with other people and teach others how to do that. So
Mm.
and I love the theme. The theme of that cruise was navigating your future. And that's exactly what, if anyone's listening, like you have the ability to consciously choose and navigate your future. Whatever that is, maybe your thing is like you want to open like, the biggest clothing store in the world. Whatever that is for you, it is within you for a reason. Nobody gets to think how you do for a reason.
Mm-mm. I love that. I love that theme, navigate, and the choice it's always like, I think from there it is meaning that you have the choice and you just have the right tools, just need the right tools and then the right guidance.
Exactly. When you start to do this kind of work and you start to really get clear on what it is that you actually love to do. Whatever you're passionate about, that is $1 billion idea. Please speak to someone to get clarity on your values and start taking action because if you're thinking about it, somebody else is as well.
Mm. Wow, that's such a amazing stories and amazing journey that you have, because it's a lot, you've been through a lot, and then to see you to become someone who is like helping others, it's not an easy journey, definitely, but you actually jump through the hurdle, changing from someone who have so much challenges, obstacles, and now you are willing, like it able to share so openly. So it's a beautiful stories, beautiful journey, and I really wanted to acknowledge you and wanted to say that I'm so thankful for you to share this, and for all the listeners out there, it is going to it's not easy. It's definitely such a um not it's a big journey for everyone, I think.
It's an emotional roller coaster. And
Mm.
there's a metaphor that I love around that. Life is like being in a little boat in the middle of the ocean. And you're in the little boat and you're thinking to yourself, nice day. And then out of nowhere, you see this storm coming. So a
Mm.
lot of people will be thinking, that's it. That's the end of my life. I'm stuck forever. I'm going to drown here. It's over. Other people, if you learn how to think optimistically, will be thinking that storm is going to blow me to safety so that somebody can rescue me from that island and I can do
Mm.
something else to make sure that anyone else who gets into a boat learns to bring a life jacket with them or extra
Mm.
paddles, right? So there's
Oh.
a little way of like quickly shifting your perception there, but you know
That's
what, Vivienne, that's my mission to the world. One heart, one mind, one breath, one step at a time. If you do that and you learn to think with your heart, it can be very, very simple to navigate yourself out of any situation that you end up in, whether that's in your personal life or professional life, and anything that you do. The key is just to be able to have that ability to have a profound self-inquiry and conversation from the observer perspective of someone that's watching you versus being in the story. That is what changed the game for me. So
Mm. Wow, that's a lot of golden nuggets that you share with us tonight, actually. And yeah, you've been so generous sharing your story, sharing some tips and a lot of your insights on what we can do moving forward. So yeah, I'm very mindful of the time as well. It has been like 1 hour you sharing with us, and I really love that. For those of you who are listening, I'm pretty sure you agree that with me, Margaret has been sharing so many useful information for us. So what's next for Margaret?
Well, Margaret at the moment is looking at, taking things to the next level in regards to being able to share this with people across the world. English is the dominant language that I speak, but I truly believe that the simplicity of how I teach people what I've learned to do, and so that I can create what I have in this world, ought to be accessible in multi-languages. So that's the next project, expanding the work in such a way that people in different countries and in different languages can adopt it simply, because there's 8 billion people on the planet. I'm one person. If I can do my little bit, and you do your little bit, and everybody plays their little part to expand this and create the domino effect of love around the world. It takes one crazy person like me with an idea to do this, and then other people to say, yes, we can do that, in Vietnamese, in Cambodian, in English, in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese. I believe that we can, maybe it's my childhood crush on Michael Jackson. We can heal the world. We can 100% do that. And I was lucky enough to go to his concert in Australia. That just gives you an indication to my age. But I truly believe that to impact the world, we ought to be able to teach this simply in multi-languages. So that's the next step, is refreshing my Cambodian and Italian and learning other languages, or maybe getting other people involved that want to share this mission and help other people move forward with an open mind.
Wow, I can help with the Mandarin part. So are you planning to write a book? Because I think your stories, it's worth so much to be written in the books, and it's just like it even can become a movie. I think your story is.
Well, I think if you've given me the idea, I'm definitely open to, doing that. And I actually would love to hear your story as well, because, I'm one of many, but I have been told that many, many times. And I do have the framework, because, one of the things that I do with my clients and myself is actually get the story out. So I do agree with you. I think it would change a lot of people's lives, just to have the awareness that this is something that they can read and relate to and shift from. So yes, public declaration, I will write a book.
I'm looking forward for that book, and then maybe even for the movie as well. And I really love that. I really love what you were sharing with us tonight, Margaret. Thank you for your time. And before we wrap up, I know that you've been spending a lot of time with us. Before we wrap up, is there any other advice that you would like to give to other women out there?
Regardless of your story, you have a voice, you have a mission, and something that you've experienced. Just by sharing your story will empower somebody else and impact their lives and influence them to do something that will then impact somebody else. So know that you were born for a reason. My recommendation is to ask yourself the question, what is your 𝐬𝐑𝐑𝐍𝐈𝐆𝐆? What can you do to help other people, one heart and step at a time, do something for someone else that changes their life.
Beautiful. I love that. I really love that. You're one step at a time, and asking yourself what is that you can do to help others, to change others. That's such an important piece of information and advice, especially to women out there, regardless of what's your background, what's your circumstances, and see how Margaret can just shift her life, and you can do it too. I think everyone can do it.
100%. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, but if you're a woman, we've got the advantage of being able to talk a lot. So let's do that.
Oh, thank you so much for your time with us tonight, Margaret. It really means a lot to everyone out there because I think your message and your stories is very impactful. And then thank you so much for your time today with us, Margaret. And I think because I believe that the stories and the conversation that we have tonight is just surface level. You have so much more that we can dig into. And I'm definitely hoping to speak to you again the next time.
I would be absolutely honored. And once again, Vivienne, thank you so much for creating this platform for other women to share their voice because it is with people like yourself that give us the space to do that, so that we can just, play our part in creating the impact. So we appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much. Like you say, we do a small part and then, yeah, who knows that someone's out there is waiting for your message and our message. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. And
Thank
I'll
you.
see you next time, Margaret. Bye.
Okay.